Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the Packernet Podcast. I am your host and resident fanalist, as always, Ryan Schlipp. Check us out online, packernet.com. Find me on Twitter, pack_data. Well, we've got some of the biggest news to come out in a little while. In regard to the Jaire situation, or really anything else for that matter. But Matt Schneidman put out an article from The Athletic. Packers proposed restructured contract to cornerback Jaire Alexander per source. He says there's finally been a development in the Jaire Alexander offseason saga, though the contract status with the Packers isn't resolved just yet. According to a source with knowledge of the situation, the Packers have proposed a restructured contract to Alexander, which tangibly demonstrates their interest in retaining the two-time All-Pro cornerback during an offseason in which they have been open to trading him. Now, to be clear, the reporting earlier, the validity of it I don't know, but the reporting earlier had always been the Packers had not offered a restructured contract, and Jaire and his camp would refuse it if they did. Maybe I shouldn't say restructure. I'm not positive if it was restructure or reduction. I'm not entirely sure. But that was the initial reporting. So from my end, it's still a question of, okay, where does Jaire stand with this whole thing? Continuing, Alexander and his agent, John Thornton of Rock Nation, have not agreed to a restructuring yet. Alexander, 28, wants to remain in Green Bay and has 2 years remaining on a then record contract extension he signed in 2022 for $21 million annually. According to Over the Cap, Alexander has the third highest cap number on the team for 2025, about $24.6 million, behind Jordan Love and Rashawn Gary. Alexander has a base salary of $16.15 million, a per-game roster bonus of $650,000, and a workout bonus of $700,000. However, Gutekunst's first draft pick has only played in 16 of 37 games over the last 2 seasons, because of 4 different injuries and a 1-game suspension. Alexander participated in the voluntary first week of the offseason program, but that was virtually because of the draft being held in Green Bay. He has not yet reported to Lambeau Field for in-person voluntary offseason work, as his future with the team remains uncertain, but he plans to attend mandatory minicamp on June 10th, if not before, even if the contract situation isn't resolved, according to a source. The Packers could still release Alexander before he shows if negotiations for a restructuring reach a dead end. If they release Jaire before June 1st, they would free up about $7.6 million in cap space, according to Over the Cap. If they do so after June 1st, they would free up about $17.1 million. The Packers aren't strapped for cap, though, ranking 10th in the NFL with about $28.9 million in cap space. As it stands, the Packers' top 3 outside corners are Keyshawn Carrington and Nate Hobbs. Both Nixon and Hobbs have primarily played nickel in the NFL, but the Packers plan on playing on the outside. Nixon likely more than Hobbs. If healthy, Alexander would be the team's best option for the position. While his future with the Packers has been in limbo, Alexander has worked out this offseason with McKinney and remained in touch with the team. We've heard a lot of reports about him being in contact with the team, being very cool, getting, texting new players, saying welcome to Green Bay, all that kind of stuff. So it's been a very odd offseason, not in that there's drama, because that's been a mainstay for the last, 4 or 5 years or so. It's been pretty common. But just in terms of, I don't know exactly what's going on, and I definitely don't know why it's going on. Jaire is currently our corner, right? It's like, no. Like, what? Well, yeah, there's some stuff going on. Like, what? Well, I don't think the Packers want him, and I don't think Jaire wants to be here. Why? I don't know. Are you sure? Well, no. The team might want him here. What? Yeah, and I'm pretty sure Jaire wants to be here, actually. He's been very friendly, and he's been participating and talking to the coaches and the other players. Okay. Yeah, but he's not restructuring his contract. Really? Well, he might, but the Packers haven't offered it. Why? Well, actually, they did. Okay. The heck is going on? Now, again, this is fairly new information as of today, but I do think there is a slight bit of overreaction. There seems to be a whole lot of celebrating that, yay, he's back, and it's like, well, look, it's not 100%. And as much as I hate to be a wet blanket on it, just to be clear, about 2 months ago, Everybody was 100, everybody except maybe JJ, everybody was 100% sure he was gone. By the way, big ups to JJ for just battling through the storms. It was getting pretty hairy there for a while, and he was still standing there going 0% chance he's leaving. It's like, well, I give you props, dude, for holding it down, but I'm not gonna stand on 100 anymore, I don't think. But the point is, it was supposedly about 100% that he was gone, and now we're like what 90% that he's coming back. I don't know. I'm just taking this as a positive sign. If nothing else, the fact that both sides seem to want to get something done is the strongest case for the fact that something's going to get done. I don't really see a reason why it wouldn't at this point. The only real hindrance that I saw was some potential locker room thing or cancerous thing that I couldn't see but must have been there because something was going on, which is what made this so hard to assess from the get-go. Because from what I can see, there's no issue. Everything's good. Yeah, he's been injured. That sucks. Oh well, that's life. We move on, right? But then there's questions of other issues. Is he possibly taking himself out of games, not playing what he can? Is Jaire upset that they're putting him in when they shouldn't? I don't know any of these things. All I can do is speculate and then assume some of it must be true, because I don't know how else we get to where we are. Except now we're not there anymore. So it's like, was any of it real, or was this all just one big giant contract negotiation? Packers just masterfully made it seem like they were tired of him, didn't want him, and went through this whole big hullabaloo just to be like, actually, never mind. Can we just maybe restructure this a little bit because it's a little painful considering you never play and whatnot? You know what I mean? If that's what happened, that is a masterful job to get the media involved and the fans involved and the players involved. Just raw emotional manipulation, you know what I mean? Just like an abusive partner, like a super psychotic one. Well done. Very well done. The lengths will go to get save a couple bucks here. But, at this point, I do think corner might be our biggest weakness. At least it's the position that I have the least faith that something great is going to magically happen. And you add Jaire and, there's you wanted a big offseason acquisition. It's essentially it. Also, if I can add to my conspiracy theory about this all being fake and made up from the beginning, the Packers sure approached the draft like a team that wasn't worried about the situation. I mean, sometimes it just falls that way, and then sometimes you're just screwing with me. I'm just saying. So we'll see how it goes. Obviously, there's still concerns about Jaire and his injury issues and whatnot, and he may never fully recover from that. So regardless, we need to start the process of turning the page, and that is to wean ourselves off of his contract and at the same time start to look for potential replacements down the line. I don't think this is something we could have done just boom in a terrible free agent period and in one draft class and whatnot. But we're going to need to revamp that corner room in the coming years, no matter what. But cold turkey coming off of Jaire, I just didn't fully understand that. And again, there is the outside chance that he is back healthy, even if he's not going to be healthy for most of his years. I mean, it would almost be unlikely that he never has a single healthy year, Maybe we get him for one. But yeah, I think, with Jaire back and presumably, and again, I'm speaking hypothetically, but with Jaire back, I think we do have an upgraded corner room with Jaire and Keyshawn on the boundary and Nate Hobbs in the slot. That's how I assume it's going to be. I know some people would put Valentine in there, I'm just saying. Xavier McKinney in year 2, Evan Williams at safety. Edgerrin Cooper getting full-time year 2 snaps with Quay. I think I'm more interested in if Quay can take a bigger step here than I am Edgerrin Cooper. I feel like he was starting to hit his stride a little bit. I see the linebacker group improving. I'm kind of hopeful that Tyron Hopper can step up and be that 3 this year, as a third-round pick. Not only do I like him, but I think as a third-round pick, you kind of have to do that. We're kind of expecting you to do that. Defensive line, I'm hoping and expecting improvement across the board. We'll talk a little bit about Lucas Van Ness here a little later, but that's got to happen. Barron Sorrell hopefully can add a little bit as a rotational outside piece. Hoping for some big things from Wyatt as a pass rusher. We'll see if Warren Brinson or Nazir Stackhouse can kind of bring in that nose tackle run defense presence that we're hoping for. I'm hoping to see more Brenton Cox this year, as he was a pretty big deal that was kind of pushed down the line. I'm hoping that doesn't happen, this year. If Kingsley can't be that dude, then Kingsley can't be that dude, and we can put in, Brenton Cox, Aaron Mosby, Barron Sorrell, whoever that dude is. Offensive line, obviously, I'm hoping for some pretty big things. We got Aaron Banks at the left guard spot. I'm hoping that isn't a step backwards. Elton Jenkins at center should be a big improvement. Right guard has to be an improvement. Whether that's Sean Ryan taking another step, or Anthony Belton stepping into that spot, or Jordan Morgan stepping into that spot, somebody has to massively improve that. Zach Tom still on the right side. I hate to say hopefully we improve the left tackle spot, but, with the investment that we've made, I hate to push Rasheed Walker out. I think that's one of the best draft picks the Packers have made in quite a while. We'll talk about that as well. But it's hard to not get excited about the prospect potentially of Jordan Morgan and Anthony Belton starting and seeing what some of that potential could look like. Jordan Love, obviously hoping for improvement based on last year, the injuries, all that stuff. Josh Jacobs, or the run game in total, I would hope for some improvement. Number one, because of the offensive line improvements. I'm also hoping to see something from Marshawn Lloyd. Hopefully he can add to that room and improve the overall output. Wide receiver, obviously we're hoping for some improvements. Number one, because the drops were out of control last year, even for a group of guys that are kind of drop heavy. It was way out of control. But also, obviously, Matthew Golden, Savion Williams. And, we won't count out Mecole Hardman. We'll see if he can bring something to the table here. I mean, pretty much across the board, the only place, and even tight end, because Luke Musgrave has been, we'll see if he gets injured again, but he's similar in line to, Christian Watson, where it isn't materializing. A lot of it is because it's hard to get him on the field for more than 3, 4, or 5 weeks at a time before he goes out with some kind of an injury. But, yeah, I mean, across the board, and not everything's going to materialize. Not everything's going to be positive. Not everything's going to go this way. But it's hard to look at a single spot and say there's no reason for hope here. Corner probably would have been that spot for me with the, even with, I guess with Hobbs, you could say that just getting Bullard out of the slot, which I'm hoping we're doing, should be an improvement. I didn't think he did a very good job there. Maybe he can, do something. I don't know. But, yeah, if assuming Jaire is coming back, it's very easy to see how there's improvement. There should be improvement everywhere. There's at least room for growth, and it's not that crazy or biased to look at it that way, considering this is the youngest team in football and has been for a couple years. It's time for guys to start grabbing the bull by the horns. It's time to start getting some solidified, like we've been saying, we got some solid contributors across the board. We need to further solidify some spots with contributors, and we need to start seeing some guys really rise to the occasion. We're hoping that's Matthew Golden at wide receiver. We're hoping we added that on the offensive line, whether that be in Anthony Belton or Jordan Morgan or Aaron Banks. We're hoping to get back to that with Jordan Love. Pretty sure we already kind of have that with Josh Jacobs. We need that on the edge. I'm hoping it's Rashawn Gary. If not, outside chance Lucas Van Ness takes a step. If not, and again, pretty outside shot, but Barron Sorrell is a 4th-round pick potentially. Maybe Colin Oliver, who knows? We got a guy at middle linebacker with Cooper. We got a guy at corner with Jaire. We got a guy at safety with McKinney. It's all there. You know what I mean? Everything is there. But it just isn't. We've had a hard time keeping it together, either because of guys underachieving or injuries or whatever the case may be. Jaire's out. The entire defensive line group forgot how to rush the passer. Jordan hurt. Musgrave hurt. Our interior offensive line over the years deteriorated. I thought maybe we had something at center and right guard. It became obvious that wasn't happening, and so we had to replace that. Wide receiver. We obviously have got some solid pieces there. Is anybody going to step up and grab the bull by the horns? Well, Watson can't stay healthy. Wicks can't stop dropping passes. Reed is too spotty. Dobbs, too spotty. They're all solid. We need a guy that can come up and be that dude, and we're hoping that's Matthew Golden. So again, we're going to run through it again. It's just constant iterations. And this is the NFL in a nutshell. You're constantly going through this process. And just when you think you got it, this guy got old, this guy got hurt, this guy retired, this guy, whatever. And you got to start all over again. But we've got a pretty nice window here with everybody being young. If we can really get a solid core going, there's not going to be the amount of turnover that you're going to see with the Packers that you see with a lot of other teams, at least for a few more years. You look around the league at teams that have just 30-year-old guys across the board, and teams like the Bears and Vikings who love to bring in free agents that are 30, 32, 35 years old. So they're not even trying. They're just, these one-year rental guys all the time. So we're not going to be going through the kinds of things that they're going through where every year you have to find XYZ number of guys that are new. But we have to take advantage of this opportunity. Otherwise, congratulations on being young, and that's about it. Hang the frickin' banner. You know what I mean? But okie dokie, that's it for the Jaire news, at least as far as I am currently aware. So why don't we take a break, come back, and see what else is going on. We'll be right back. So I wanted to play this. I thought this was kind of interesting. The data behind it is interesting. Can kind of explore potentially what it means. Warren Sharp put out this short on YouTube, and it says, Packers refuse QB sneaks, but wanted tush push banned. It's just 2.5 minutes. Here we go.
What was the genesis of banning the tush push this past offseason? How did it get started? I went back and looked. It was Mark Murphy, the Green Bay Packers president and CEO, writing on the team website this past February, and I quote, "There is no skill involved, and it is almost an automatic first down on plays of a yard or less. It's bad for the game." This is exactly what he wrote on the website. Keep in mind, nowhere does he mention player safety. Now, a couple months later, it snowballed into being an issue of player safety. And even though there's no data to support it yet, the doctors might think that this should be a player safety issue, and so we should ban the tush push. Okay, push that to the side for a second. I went back and looked at what have the Green Bay Packers been doing? Because Mark Murphy is so upset that this is such an automatic first down and the Eagles have this advantage. My guess is a lot of the other owners feel the same way. They don't really care about the player safety aspect. They just don't want a team like the Eagles with those bodies up front and this great formation that they use to have such an edge with Jalen Hurts and strong running backs pushing him, etc. So the Green Bay Packers...
First of all, I want you to keep that in the back of your mind because that doesn't really make sense as we go forward.
Packers have had 31 different plays on 4th and 1 over the last 3 years, which is when the Eagles started the tush push 3 years ago. 31 plays on 4th and 1. Do you know how frequently they're converting a first down if they do their own quarterback sneak? I'm not talking about a tush push, just taking the snap and getting a sneak. 80% conversion rate. The Green Bay Packers are converting first downs 80% of the time. And yet, get this, their overall mark on conversions on 4th and 1 is 55%. That ranks 30th in the NFL. They're the third worst team in the NFL at converting on 4th and 1. How does that match up with the fact that they've got an 80% conversion rate on quarterback sneaks? Well, it's simple. It's because they are not using the quarterback sneaks enough. Only 16% of their 4th and 1s have been quarterback sneaks. The rest of them have been pass plays or running back runs. And guess what? Their running back runs are converting 37.5%, and their pass plays are converting at 50%. That's not the Eagles' problem that Matt LaFleur and the Green Bay Packers are calling too many pass plays and running back runs and not enough quarterback sneaks. The Green Bay Packers are converting 80% of the quarterback sneaks into first downs. You know what the Philadelphia Eagles did on tush pushes last year? 81% conversion rate. The Green Bay Packers have been doing 80% over the last 3 years. Matt LaFleur just isn't calling the quarterback sneak. He's calling a lot of pass plays or running back runs, which have been terrible for the team. How's that the Philadelphia Eagles' problem?
Okay, so fair enough. But a couple things. Number one, he says explicitly that he thinks the reason that teams like the Packers don't want the tush push is because the Eagles have such an unfair advantage. How is it an unfair advantage if the Eagles are at 80% and the Packers are at 81%? So that theory doesn't fully check out. So if we kind of reverse engineer it here a little bit, the Packers know that they're converting QB sneaks at 81%. 4th and 1s with QB sneaks, whatever. Right? So why aren't they doing it? Now, I know the fan favorite answer is because they're stupid. Because you're stupid. Because you're so stupid. Look, maybe. Is that the best answer, though? You think they don't know the metrics? You think they don't know that QB sneaks convert 81% of the time? and that run plays are 37.5. Giving it to Josh Jacobs on 4th and 1 is about a 33% success rate, 50% for passing. Of course they know. So why aren't they doing it? Why did they say they're not doing it? They're afraid of injuring the quarterback. That's why. And it makes sense why the NFL would want to get involved and want to push this and want to make this a thing. This reminds me very much of all the offseason stuff that I've been talking about with the players' unions and all that kind of stuff that becomes annoying. You have a situation, for example, where there is an offseason. And some people will come in and they'll work all offseason. They'll work with the coaches. They'll do all these different things. What's the problem with that? Well, it's not a problem for those that want to do everything they can to be better. The problem is it gives those people a competitive edge. And so the only way that you can really compete is if you basically force everyone to do what nobody wants to do, which is nobody gets an offseason. Everybody's here. All the coaches, all the players, everybody has to be here. And so they build it into the CBA that everybody has to essentially take a vacation. Not allowed to come to the facility. You're not allowed to talk to your coaches. You're not allowed to do anything. So that the people that want to go relax can go relax, and there's no real competitive disadvantage to doing so, right? The Packers, I believe, and a lot of other teams feel right now that the only way they can maintain a competitive edge with the Eagles is by putting their quarterback at continued risk on every 4th and 1 situation. And I believe they went to the league office with this, and the league office said this is terrible because the number one goal of Roger Goodell and the league office is to protect quarterbacks. Players, kind of, more specifically quarterbacks. And so when you have the Green Bay Packers and a bunch of other teams going to the league office saying, bro, this is bullcrap. Like, I have to throw Jordan Love headfirst into a pile of defensive tackles on every 4th and short situation or 3rd and short situation to maintain a competitive edge with the Eagles. I don't want to do that. And so I think maybe we're looking at it backwards and we say, well, just stop it. Stopping it isn't so much the issue as it is initiating it. I don't think the Packers have as much of a problem with the concept of stop it. They don't like the idea that they have to stop it, but other teams don't have to stop it because they're not going to run it because they don't want to risk their quarterback. And so similarly to a lot of other issues, rather than say either do this thing that you don't want to do that you would consider to be unhealthy and have a competitive disadvantage, or follow this team down a rabbit hole of what you deem to be a terrible decision. And that's probably why, by the way, 20 some odd teams voted in favor of banning the tush push. Because teams are looking at it saying, I don't want my quarterback to be forced, essentially, because that's a huge gap between, what was it, 40% or something? I don't know what the actual number was of times they actually convert compared to the times that they convert if they put Jordan Love out there head first. That's why they're doing this. That's why so many teams want it banned. That's why the league office wants it banned, and that's why so many teams behind it support that idea. Eagles obviously don't because they feel like that's fine. I'm fine doing this. And so it becomes a question of, are you okay doing this, or do you not want to risk your quarterback to do this? But what they don't want is that competitive gap between teams willing to sacrifice their quarterbacks converting 80% and teams not willing to sacrifice their quarterbacks converting at 40, 50%. That's the competitive disadvantage that they're trying to offset, and the incentive to put quarterbacks at risk being initiated by the Eagles is what a lot of teams and what the league office wants dead. They do not want an incentive structure that incentivizes teams to put quarterbacks at risk. You can say, well, there's no data that it puts them at. It doesn't matter. At least I don't think it does. Maybe they have their own data. I don't know. But the bottom line is teams don't want to risk it. Again, why aren't the Packers doing it? Because they're worried. They don't want Jordan Love running that play. They will on occasion, but they don't want to do it every single time. It's kind of like mobile quarterbacks. Teams love it when their quarterback takes off and run. But they also hate it. Jordan takes off and runs for 10 yards and slides and there's no damage done and everything's fine and you get a first down. That's great. You certainly don't want to build an offense around your quarterback running, unless you have Lamar Jackson, and even then you're gritting your teeth every time that guy goes out and runs outside of the pocket. No coaches like quarterbacks taking that into their own hands. So I think that is kind of what's happening right now. All right, let's take our final break. I did a little bit of work to go through, and there's no perfect way to do it, and I'm not going to pretend that this is, but let's just say for all intents and purposes, I went through and graded all the GMs and how they've been doing in their careers as drafters. And there's a lot of different things we can do with this, a lot of different interesting little tidbits in terms of the best and worst draft picks and GMs and whatever. But I want to at least start taking a peek at this data with the backdrop of somebody I'm not a big fan of saying nonsense, because I also enjoy doing that. We'll take a break. We'll be right back. All right, so I want to do this. This is kind of unnecessary, but it's just one way of kind of introducing this a little bit. There's a video, NFL Daily with Greg Rosenthal, where Greg Rosenthal and Patrick Claybon have sort of a GM off. They take turns selecting the GM if they were to hire, and it goes through and all, back and forth and whatnot. Again, it doesn't really matter, but I thought it would be kind of cool to bounce it off of them compared to some of the data that I got. They are excluding 2024 GMs. 2025 GMs. I'm excluding 2025 and 2024. The reason being, and I potentially should leave off 2023 as well, but that just doesn't leave us with a ton. The outliers for the 2024 draft are pretty massive, even for the Packers. I mean, as you could imagine, when your first two picks don't even play, really, and that's not super uncommon, but it's also on the positive side. When you have 1 year and they play really, really well, it doesn't have a chance to kind of level off with maybe some down years, some injuries, et cetera, et cetera. It really stands out the most with Nick Caserio and the Houston Texans, because if I'm not counting 2024, I'm only counting. So if you're a GM and your first year was 2023, I'm counting 1 year. That 1 year, he got C.J. Stroud. The gap between Nick Caserio as a GM and the next best GM is laughable. So to give you an idea, basically the range is between negative 0.7 and 1.8. There's two outliers here. One of them is going to stick, and we're going to talk about it and laugh about it. It's going to be a lot of fun. But pretty much everybody's between negative 0.7 and 1. But the second best GM, and I'll tell you how I came up with the number in a second, was a 1.8. Nick Caserio is at a 13.5. So there's a lot of issues with this, and there, like I said, there's no perfect way to do it. It's kind of a case-by-case sort of a thing. For example, the length of time that you've been doing it. I think there's a lot to be said about looking at things cumulatively, but at the same time, you can be a very mediocre GM that's been mediocre for 10 years, and so you're taking mediocrity times 10 and then comparing it to someone who's done it for 1 or 2 years, so it's better to kind of average it out. Part of the issue is positional value, like quarterbacks. If you've drafted a quarterback, even a bad quarterback, they've probably exceeded the expectation for that spot, because what I'm really doing is I'm saying, okay, so for pick 74, what is the expected value? It's not hard for a quarterback to sail past the expected value of whatever pick 74 is. But you can't adjust for position necessarily, because now you're getting real stupid. Now you're saying that kickers and quarterbacks are about the same. I mean, you should be rewarded for positional value, but at the same time, not every team needs a quarterback. So if you need a quarterback and you draft a quarterback, you're probably going to be better off. If you don't need a quarterback, you're kind of screwed. You can draft one anyways, and he can sit on the bench, and you're still going to look like an idiot because he's going to provide you no value. Or you don't draft a quarterback because you don't need one, and you don't get that value. So this is very much skimming the surface, but essentially all I did was I went back and looked, first of all, at every pick since 2010. The metric I used was AV. It's Pro Football Reference uses it. It's an all-encompassing metric, something that's relatively easy to access, and there are very few metrics that meet that criteria of being all-encompassing and easily accessible. Right? I mean, it would be better than PFF grade because PFF grade normalizes for position. A 74 quarterback and a 74 running back are not giving you the same value. So I wouldn't want to use that anyways. So AV is a pretty good metric. And so the point is, for every single pick whether it's pick number 1 overall, 10 overall, 150 overall, based on the last 15 years of NFL drafts, what is the average expected AV per year? What is the expected value that I should get from this player drafted at this position per year? Then you go back and look at each team and each draft pick, and you say, okay, now let's read that back into it. Since 2010, what did these actual draft picks put out compared to what was expected of them? So if I just grab a random person here, let's see the first name that I recognize here, Vic Beasley. Vic Beasley was drafted by Atlanta as an outside linebacker at pick number 8 overall in the first round in 2015. He played for 6 years and had a total AV of 32, which is a 5.3 average yearly AV. That's what he was giving you in value, a 5 every year. His expected AV for the 8th overall pick was 5.9 per year. So his AV versus expected on a yearly basis was negative 0.629277815. And then I added in the metric. I called it total failure because I thought it was funny. It's total. You're multiplying it by how many years you were there because, again, it depends what you're looking for. Sometimes you want to know on average where you were. Sometimes you want to know the cumulative effect. His total failure was a negative 3.7. That is to say, over his 6 years, he gave us 3.78 AV less than expected over those his career. Then there is the percentage of expected. So what percentage of what was expected of you did you achieve? He got to 89% of expected. And since I have these metrics for every single pick from that time period, I can look at all the different things. So let's pick a couple out for fun. The largest cumulative AV in that time span is Russell Wilson. Now, remember, he's been playing since 2012. Aaron Rodgers is not on this list because he was drafted in 2005. Pat Mahomes doesn't have quite as many years, but he's 7th on this list, I'm sure, in the same amount of times, whatever. But Russell Wilson is the highest with 139 AV. Highest yearly average, not surprisingly, Jaden Daniels. Why? Because it's only been 1 year, and again, he doesn't have the opportunity to have less. If you exclude him, it's Lamar Jackson at 14.4 AV. The highest expected is just the expected for the number 1 pick. So every number 1 pick is expected to get 6.5 per year. Now, again, if you're a quarterback, a 6.5 is not very good. Caleb Williams got an AV of 12, so he almost doubled the expected AV of the pick. Not because he's good, but because he's a quarterback, and it's easy to reach those levels. This is where it kind of goes off the rails, but again, it's as good as I can get it for now. The highest AV versus expected. Again, Jaden Daniels, expected 6.4, he got 20. If you look at multiple years, it's Brock Purdy. Shouldn't be very hard to figure out why. Brock Purdy was the number 262nd pick in the NFL draft. As the 262nd pick, he's expected to give you 1.28 AV per year. He's putting out 10.7. So again, depending how you want to slice it, best draft pick since 2010, arguably Brock Purdy. If you look at the total failure metric, it's Russell Wilson. It's how much better you've done compared to expected, multiplied by how many years you've been doing it. Russell Wilson, another candidate for best pick for that reason. 13 years of exceeding his draft value by 7.8 AV every single year. And then percent above expected, again, similarly, is going to be Brock Purdy. 933% is the amount of value over his expected. Number 2 is Puka Nacua, then Tyreek Hill, Bucky Irving, and then Trey Smith, Kansas City offensive lineman. Now, if you look at the worst, as a percentage, the only thing you could really do is get to 0% because you've done nothing. Although there were 2 guys that had negative AV, which is very weird. But that's where I go to the total failure metric. The worst draft pick, according to this, since 2010, Blaine Gabbert. That's followed by wide receiver Kevin White, drafted by the Bears in 2015. Then Deion Jordan, John Ross, and Laquan Treadwell. If you look at it from a per year standpoint, The worst pick since 2010 was Kevin White, Bears wide receiver, then Deion Jordan, then Troy Fautanu, just been 1 year, then Trey Lance, then Josh Rosen. All right, so we getting the idea? This is how each individual pick is done. And then I just went through and I said, okay, the Detroit Lions' Brad Holmes has been there since 21. So I want to look at the average per year AV. This is cumulative for each draft year. So for 2021, 2022, and 2023. For Brandon Beane in Buffalo, it's 2017 through 2023. So there is a cumulative metric and a per-year metric. And based on that, I did rank the 24 GMs. I'm leaving off Dan Morgan in Carolina, James Gladstone in Jacksonville, John Spytek for the Raiders, Joe Hortitz for the Chargers, Elliott Wolf for the Patriots, Darren Mogi for the Jets, Mike Bergonzi of the Titans, and Adam Peters. Peters, Hortitz, and Morgan were all there in 2024, but again, it's too much of an outlier, so I just left it off. So again, I'm going to go through this just because it's interesting to kind of interact with their thought process and also somewhat contradict some of the very obvious things that they're going to say and argue about and whatnot. So we won't go through this whole thing. I'll just do a couple of theirs so I can kind of argue with them, and then we'll kind of get to the point as we get a little bit. We're already pushing 40 minutes, but here is their number one pick.
Who is going to get the first overall pick? It feels like an obvious one. Patrick won the drawing. Who are you taking?
With the first pick in our 2025 GM draft, I would like to select Howie Roseman of the Philadelphia Eagles. And it feels chalky because it is. I tried to develop a metric using the weighted adjusted value on Pro Football Reference on the
So they did the same thing, essentially.
Draft page.
Wow.
For players, which is going to skew towards the guys who have been drafting players the longest because it's a cumulative thing. Like if you
doesn't have to be.
You draft Calais Campbell, you've got every collective season that right. Calais has had. But in that metric, in looking at the trades, the decisions, even if you want to ding him for taking Carson Wentz, he ultimately trades Carson Wentz, trades that Sam Bradford pick. They were able to make the A.J. Brown trade. You can't argue with the results of being on the cusp of one Super Bowl, keeping this team, rebuilding the roster in one season, in one draft, essentially, getting back to the Super Bowl, the coaching decisions. It's Howie for me.
Yeah.
All right. So here's the bottom line. And he kind of says this, that, going to the Super Bowl and all that stuff. If he had made the exact same decisions and they had gone to the playoffs and lost or whatever, this wouldn't be as obvious. A GM can't 100% control whether you win or lose a Super Bowl. And so deciding who the best GM is based on who just won the Super Bowl is kind of silly. I understand by the end of the year they were beating the crap out of everybody and it was super crazy. And I'm not including free agency, so that's another metric here. But just to be clear, and there's also a good amount of recency bias here because this is, the last couple of years, a lot of picks have gone very favorably for them. Based on this metric, he ranks 15th. Oh, that's stupid. And your metric sucks. I just explained how the metric works. You either like the methodology or you don't. You don't decide after the fact that I don't like it anymore because I've decided based on nothing that the Eagles GM is actually the best. And when you conflict with my metric that I just made up off the top of my head from nothing, then I'm decided I don't like your metric anymore. Let's go through the draft classes, okay? There's actual grades assigned to this, which is kind of funny. So first of all, keeping 2024 off would not have helped Philly at all. They had a C grade with a negative 4.5 AV. You say, well, how is that possible? Quinion Mitchell, Cooper DeJean. Well, yeah, they had a good first year, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 guys on that went negative. But okay, let's go to 2023. Nailed the Jalen Carter pick, right? Absolutely he did. It's a good pick, Jalen Carter. It's also the number 9 overall pick, so there was quite a bit of expectations there. But he's very, very good. Nolan Smith is negative. Keely Ringo is negative. Sidney Brown is negative. Tyler Steen is negative. Moro Ojomo is negative. And Tanner McKee is negative. That is to say that every single one of those players outside of Jalen Carter has underperformed based on expectations. Now, it's still early, so there's still time for them to possibly turn a corner. But based on the 2023 class, there's one good pick, and then particularly Tyler Steen, Sidney Brown, and Nolan Smith have been very negative. 2022, so the real hot spot for Philly is 2020 through 2022, with 2022 being pretty average, but 2020 and 2021 were the big ones. 2019, 2023, and 2024 were all negative. But even if we go back to 2022, Jordan Davis, he's elite, he's all these things. He has underperformed expectations. He was the number 13 overall pick. He's almost exactly at average, but he's not there. He's underperformed. Cam Jurgens is a good pick. Nakobe Dean was a good pick. Grant Calcaterra has underperformed, and Kyron Johnson has massively underperformed. So the big ones have been Jalen Hurts, Devontae Smith, Landon Dickerson, Miles Sanders, Kenneth Gainwell, Quez Watkins, Casey Toohill, Jalen Carter, Jack Driscoll. This is cumulative, so like Jalen Carter is relatively young. He'll surpass some of these guys in the very near future. If you look at the per year, Jalen Hurts, Devontae Smith, Landon Dickerson, Kenneth Gainwell, then Jalen Carter, Miles Sanders, and then Quez Watkins. To put this into some context, when you look at the 2.1 per year that Jalen Carter is producing above expectation, right? He's very good, but he's expected to be very good. Question is, how much better than expected is he? He's at 2.1. Do you know what a comparable pick for that is for the Green Bay Packers? Isaiah McDuffie and Kingsley Enagbare. They're both right in that range. So most fans would look at it and say, well, obviously, Jalen Carter was a significantly better pick. Well, what do you mean by better? Better player or better pick? Better player is no question. Better pick has to do with expectations. So when we point to Philly, and I'm not trying to say he's a bad GM, but when we point to Philly and say, boy, they got Cooper DeJean and they won a Super Bowl, he's the best GM. I don't know, man. And trust me, it's not biased, because I think the best GM in the NFL, if I had to pick one, which we'll get to in a second here, is not who I want to admit. It probably is. And remember, I didn't come up with a list of who I want to be the best GM and then build a metric around it. I built a metric that I thought made the most sense to me, and then let the results fall where they may, which is how you should do these things. It's sort of the opposite view of how social media wants to do everything. I go with everything based off of how my gut feels, and then try to find metrics that confirm my priors. So, as I think I said, I have Philadelphia and Howie Roseman sitting at 15. Now, remember, the last 3 years haven't been super great, but if the last 2 years, the guys that are on those teams really start to, or continue to do what they're doing, this can turn around. But yeah, I don't have them super high. Number 2 on the list is probably, unfortunately, who I would put at number 1 on the list. It's kind of a small sample size, but not really. Again, number 1 on the list is actually Nick Caserio, but that's kind of cheating. Should probably just remove him from the list. Number 2 on the list is who they have number 2, who I would probably put number 1, and that's Brad Holmes of the Detroit Lions. 1.86 for an average year for an entire draft class, which is not easy to do, on average. He's one of only 3 that is above a 1, again, one of those being Caserio. The only other guy is Brandon Beane for the Buffalo Bills at 1.14. Now, the draft grade for Detroit in 2024 is so far pretty terrible. It's like a -5. It's really, really bad. And so we'll see kind of how that materializes and if that stays that way. But otherwise, the 3 years in 2023 was an 8.2, a 4, and a 15. For reference, that 2021 15 grade is, let's see how many, if any, that was, of all the draft classes, the 4th best draft class of any team through 2010. The only better draft classes would be the 2017 New Orleans Saints, the 2018 Buffalo Bills, and the 2018 Baltimore Ravens. Obviously, Amon-Ra St. Brown is a massive one from that draft class, being a fourth-round pick. But also, you've got Penei Sewell. Even for a number 7 overall pick, he is well above expectations. You got Derek Barnes. You got Alim McNeil, who's a third-round pick that's well above expectations. So really hoping that this run for Detroit is running out, because they have been on an absolute tear. And it's unfortunate because if there's anything that's going to cause a team to be, temporarily inflated, but they're about to fall off, that sort of bubble, is the fact that they're, for one reason or another, they got lucky, but they're not really building a strong foundation through good drafting. When you're building through good drafting and you got 3 really solid years of drafting, that's not just going to disappear. But again, so far 2024 looks pretty terrible, so we'll see how that goes. All right. Another thing they were fighting about on here was Terry Fontenot, which I was kind of surprised about. I guess I shouldn't be because he and I used a similar metric. But for the Atlanta Falcons, Fontenot was picked by Claiborne, I think at like 10. And Greg Rosenthal threw a fit and is like, he should be at the bottom of the list. I actually kind of agree. I have Fontenot sitting at 10th. So that one definitely stood out as being surprising. One spot after that is Brian Gutekunst of the Green Bay Packers. He is on the positive side of things, on the positive side of the AV thing, 1.4 overall, 0.23 per year. So out of the 24 GMs that I actually looked at, he's sitting kind of upper middle at 11. The specifics of the draft classes. The overall story here for Brian Gutekunst is that he got off to a slow start. 2018 and 2019 were his lowest draft classes, with 2018 being his worst, with a negative 0.57. It's a C grade, by the way. And then in 2019, a negative 0.2 C plus grade. Those are the only negative draft classes that he's had outside of 2024. Again, we got to see how that pans out. Also, Jordan Love's going to make a huge difference in this. Again, he's a quarterback. It's not going to take very long for him to start accumulating massive amounts of points. Talking AV points here, for whatever that is. And so that 2020 class, which is sitting at a B+, is going to be an A very quickly, with another year or two of Jordan Love. But as far as 2024, again, first-round pick, expectations clearly not met. The running back not met. So that was a C- grade. So far, his worst draft class. Again, depending on what actually happens with these guys. I kept out 2024 because there's a ton of outliers for pretty much everybody. Like I said, Detroit, by far their worst draft class. On and on down the line. A lot of different teams. But 2020, B+ grade, 0.6 AV surplus. 2021, a B grade, 0.32 surplus. 2022 was his best draft class, A- grade, 1.21 average AV surplus. 2023 was a B grade, 0.29 AV surplus. So every year since 2020, so far, he's exceeded expectations for the picks. And again, this is mathematical. It's not really debatable. We could talk about whether there are better metrics or better ways to do that. That's fine. But what I can tell you conclusively that I've done is I can tell you what the expectation is for a certain player. And I can tell you whether they exceeded that or fell short of that. And what I am telling you is that since 2020, so let's be specific, 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023, they have all exceeded expectations. 2024 is pending. Unlikely that 2018 or 2019 are able to recover. Jaire, I'm guessing, actually Jaire has gone negative, which is very sad to see. I just looked it up. He obviously has exceeded expectations, but when you, over the last 3 or 4, however many years, are playing 50% of your snaps, he has drifted negative in terms of exceeding expectations. Rashawn obviously also missed a lot of time. I don't know where he is. I didn't look it up. It's possible they come in, have a banner year, and kind of elevate it a little bit. but I don't think 2018 or 19 are necessarily salvageable because the draft classes are basically gone at this point. Now, a couple other things that I wanted to bring up. I was hoping they would be all excited on this video about Ryan Poles so I could make fun of them. They weren't. They put Ryan Poles 23rd on the list, and I have him 21st. Again, they have him 23rd out of 28. I have him 21st out of 24. It's about the same thing. Fourth worst GM out of this group is Ryan Poles. It's only a 2-year sample size, and 3 out of the 4 bottom GMs are 2-year sample sizes, which probably has something to do with it. A lot of the guys that have, 5+ years are right there in the middle for obvious reasons. But Ryan Poles has been not good. And to be clear, he drafted Caleb Williams, which is going to work in his favor no matter what. Caleb has already exceeded expectations. Again, he's a quarterback. Even bad quarterbacks are going to exceed expectations. Even despite that, even if we assume the 2024 class is going to be inflated, which wasn't in this, but the picks have not been good. In just that short period of time, here are the guys that have already come in negative so far. Jaquan Brisker, Kyler Gordon, Jatir Carter, Noah Sewell, Austin Booker, Tyler Scott, Doug Kramer, Kendall Williamson, Travis Bell, Tristan Ebner, Zachary Thomas, Zach Pickens, Kiran Amagaji, and Velus Jones, who was his worst pick. Braxton Jones was a very good pick. I've been very high on him since day one. He's a 5th-round pick, starting left tackle, very similar to Rasheed Walker. Not as good, but, similar situation. Outside of that, we'll see how Javon Dexter does. We'll see how Darnell Wright does, as those two guys took big steps in year 2. It's been rough. However, we'll finish with this for today. It's been worse for another team. Bears 21st, Giants 22nd, Andrew Berry and the Cleveland Browns 23rd, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah 24th, dead last, Minnesota Vikings. In fact, not close. The second lowest grade, the Cleveland Browns and Andrew Berry, negative 0.7 per year. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and the Minnesota Vikings, negative 2.1. That's 3 times worse than the second worst team. And by the way, they're saved by the fact that 2024 wasn't included in this because 2020, I think the lowest grade that is given on here is a D+. They got a D+ on the 2024 class. His highest grade was a C- in 2022. Negative 8.6 average AV surplus in 2022, negative 0.01, and then in 2024 so far, negative 1.4. And again, that's not even included. That is right now, 2024, so it's a little bit biased or whatever. And actually, I was wrong. D- is the worst. 1, 2, 3, 4. It is right now the 7th worst draft class ever recorded since 2010, but still, ever recorded. In his 3 years, there are a grand total of 6 picks in 3 years, 2 per year, that are at or above expectations. Jalen Naylor, wide receiver from 2022, is basically right at expectations. Ty Chandler, the running back. Will Reichert, the kicker. Vidarian Lowe, I don't even freaking know who that is, a 6th-round pick. By the way, they're meeting expectations for 6th, 5th, 6th, and 6th-round players, which is to say they're not doing anything for your team. Then you have 2nd-round pick Ed Ingram, which I think Vikings fans would violently disagree with that. He's putting out an average yearly AV of 5.3. As a pick 59 overall, he's expected to do 3.4, so he is exceeding those expectations. On some level, if you just start consistently, you're going to end up racking up some value. The number 1 pick probably shouldn't be surprising, Jordan Addison. Not by a super massive margin. He was a number 23 overall pick. The expected yearly AV is about 5. He's putting out 7.5, so that's a 2.5 surplus. To put that into perspective, the closest that you'll find that was a draft pick by Brian Gutekunst was A.J. Dillon. A.J. Dillon had a surplus of about 2.5, slightly below T.J. Slayton. Imagine if for 3 years your GM's best pick was A.J. Dillon. As for the negatives, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 picks. So out of 20 picks, 14 of them have been below average. Caleb Evans, this is from best to worst. Mekhi Blackman, Jaron Hall, Jacqueline Roy, Jay Ward, Asezi Otomewo, Levi Rodriguez, Michael Juergens, Nick Muse, Walter Rouse, Brian Asamoah, Andrew Booth, Dallas Turner, and Lewis Seen. Lewis Seen was taken in the first round, pick 32. The expected value is 4.5 per year. The yearly average, 0. Dallas Turner was taken 17 overall. Expected value of 5.4. He gave the team 2. A 2 out of 5.4. Expected yearly AV for second round pick Andrew Booth, 42 overall, was 4 AV. Per year, he put out 1 AV. This is absolutely putrid and awful. And what's crazy is he hasn't even made very many picks. You're making 6.5 picks per year, and you're accumulating this much negative value? This is awful. Absolutely awful. There is just no real value anywhere. Jordan Addison's fine. He's a fine receiver. But that's it? That's all you get? You've had 3 first-round picks, 2 seconds, 2 thirds, 2 fourths, 1, 2, 3, 4 fifth-round picks, 4 sixth-round picks, 3 seventh-round picks. You got 1 decent receiver out of that? I mean, maybe Dallas Turner becomes great. That still isn't going to make him a good GM. Again, he's got to be very good just to meet expectations. Or at least, real good, I guess. So anyway, again, I've got these lists up here. I'm sure we can do plenty more things with it. It's kind of interesting. I'm going to want to look at some of the draft picks historically, some of the best and worst. Probably not super hard to figure out. Guys like David Bakhtiari and whatnot are going to be quite high on the list. Guys like Derek Sherrod are going to be pretty low on the list, but we'll see how things go with the news. Tomorrow we have the first official OTA with media availability, so I don't know if it's going to be much or very little, but I'm very excited about it. And so I will talk to you then. Have a good one. Bye-bye.